Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the god of wrath with Kushina, Minato, Fem Kyuubi, and Haku Alive Harem Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Over the past 6 years, Naruto has made tremendous progress. He is currently sleeping in his new home deep in the forest of death that is currently hidden, along with his presence and chakra, all thanks to Kurumi. What? When you're sealed inside of Kushina Uzumaki, whose husband was Minato Namikaze, and both were seal masters, you're bound to learn a couple of things. Anyways, Naruto can currently be seen sleeping, and he has most certainly grown up. Naruto is now a little over 6 feet tall, currently the second tallest person in Konoha, just under Ibiki. He now has a crazy strong 12-pack, muscular arms and legs that provide both power and speed. Think Apachai build from Kenichi. The mightiest disciple for reference, he has naturally tan skin, showing all the time he puts into training. His hair still reaches down to his lower back and is still tied in a ponytail with black rope. He has 3 whisker marks on each cheek that have mostly faded over time. Naruto-kun, it's time to get up. You don't want to be late for graduation. Came the sound of a voice from outside his door. Upon hearing this, Naruto began to stir. He sat up and yawned, showing his still longer than normal canines. He scratched the back of his head before he opened his eyes to reveal the dazzling blue eyes that are filled with determination, life, and such an immense love, that one would become lost staring into them for too long. Alright, I'm up, Naruto said. Okay, and when you're done, breakfast is ready. The voice replied with a chipper tone. Alright, Naruto replied. Naruto got up and opened the door to head to the bathroom to shower and brush his teeth. Once that was done he went back to his room and proceeded in getting ready and gather his clothes. He went down the stairs and was greeted to the sight of his mate, Kurumi, cooking some eggs for breakfast. Kurumi hadn't changed over the years and was still the lovable, flirtatious vixen that he remembered. Good morning Kurumi, Naruto said with a smile. Good morning Naruto-kun, I'm just finishing the eggs then breakfast will be ready. Kurumi replied without turning around. Focused on cooking the eggs. Alright, that's fine, Naruto said while taking a seat. After breakfast, Kurumi tilted her head to the side and asked, So, are you ready for today? Absolutely, Naruto exclaimed, 100% confident that he will pass the test. Alright, that's what I like to hear from my mate, exclaimed Kurumi, while her tail swayed excitedly, showing her excitement. Well, Naruto began, as he began standing up, I'll let you know how everything goes later. Alright, Kurumi replied, make sure to kick plenty of out there today. Naruto simply chuckled at Kurumi's antics, while waving back at her. Time skip. At the academy, parents could be seen everywhere waiting excitedly for when their children come out with their headbands showing they passed and are now ninja. One small group, however, was more than just mothers. This group was made up of Kushina Uzumaki, Sum Inuzuka, Makoto Uchiha, Hitomi Hyuga, Hana Inuzuka, Kurenai Yuhi, Yugao Azuki, and Anko Midarashi. They were waiting for their children or sister or students depending on who you asked. While they were waiting they were talking about who would graduate and be on what team. So, who else do you think will pass? Anko asked, as she had complete faith that Naruto and the rest would pass. The Aburame and Nara for sure. Came the reply of Kurenai, both will no doubt pass all 3 parts due to being trained in their respective clan jutsu and the academy jutsu. The Akamichi and the Yamanaka will no doubt pass as well. Hana added, that is very true, and that Haruno girl will pass but that will mostly be due to her book smarts than the actually kunai, shuriken and taijutsu segments. She has, after all, only recently gotten out of her fangirl phase, added Sum acknowledging the former fangirl. The rest agreed with their assessments before realizing that the area was quiet and that all of the adult in the area were looking in a direction. The women with blushes and lust in their eyes and the males with envy. When they all turned to the direction, the group also began to blush at the sight before them. Walking to the entrance of the school was a 16-year-old boy. They were 6 feet and 3 inches, making them the second tallest person in Konoha. They wore black hakama pants with red flames designed on the bottom of the legs, all held with a gold-colored rope. Tied around their waist was a black jacket with gold trimmings. On their clearly muscular torso was an open, black, sleeveless vest that had gold trimmings. He also has bandages wrapped around his arms from his forearms to his hands, and instead of shoes he wore bandages wrapped around from his feet to his shins. He had blonde spiky hair with red streaks, all tied in a ponytail with a black rope and reach his lower back with several bangs framing his face. He had dazzling blue eyes like sapphires that radiated confidence and determination. A calm smile that told everyone he had confidence in himself. And a unique feature were the 3 whisker marks that lies on both cheeks. Think Natsu's vest from Fairy Tail Season 1, Asura's pants from the video game, Asura's Wrath, Apachai's style of wrappings from Kenichi, the mightiest disciple, and his hairstyle looks like bands from 7 Deadly Sins but is not blue. Upon seeing the whisker marks, the Kushina's group froze in shock at realizing who this red-streaked blonde god was. Naruto. The group exclaimed mentally so as to not draw attention to themselves. Naruto made his way to the academy doors and went inside. While Naruto went inside, the group were having thoughts about the Naruto they just saw. Oh my god, my baby boy has gotten so big and handsome, thought Kushina with pride and a blush, surprised at her son's growth, and he looks so strong too. How much of my son's life have I missed? Kushina thought, feeling sad at the last part. Oh my, that was Naruto. Damn, he doesn't look anything like when I saw him when he was younger or in the forest. Thought Anko, surprised by how much Naruto changed from when she would rescue him from the villagers and when she saw him in the forest 6 years ago. I wonder how big he down there. Anko thought pervertedly with a blush. Geez, what did that kid eat for breakfast for all these years? Rocks, mentally exclaimed Sum, and that was Naruto. Damn, and that feeling when he passed by felt like that of grade A alpha material. Sum thought with a blush when she focused on when he passed by. Wait, what's that feeling? Sum began thinking as she looked down and realized she was wet. What the hell? I'm wet by him just passing by. And he wasn't even doing anything. Realized Sum with her blush getting darker, once she saw she had a darker spot by her nether regions. Wait, how's Hana? Sum thought worriedly before looking at her daughter and saw the state she was in. Currently, Hana had a massive blush on her face and had fallen to her knees, quivering at the feeling of such a strong alpha passing by, while still staring at the academy doors with dazed eyes. Holy! Exclaimed Sum in surprise at realizing that her daughter had just entered pseudo heat by Naruto just passing by. I have to take her home so she can get a hold of herself, or else she may just jump his bones when we all go talk to him. Sum planned, before looking down at herself again and thinking, me too actually. While Sum was planning on handling her daughter and herself, Hana was going through her own issues. Alpha must mate with Alpha, Hana thought robotically. Wait. What am I thinking? I can't just mate him. Even though he has such big muscles, and such perfect abs, and that strong alpha aura, Hana thought, before realizing she was getting deeper into her lust. Hana looked over at her mother, who looked at her and nodded before they quickly body flickered, with their Ninken partners following close behind, home to get control of themselves. That was Naruto. How? Kurenai mentally exclaimed, he looks nothing like what Anko described all those years ago. Kurenai was in complete disbelief at the Naruto that she just witnessed. She had been thinking that he wouldn't have changed much, but she was wrong. He's so tall, and those arms, they look strong enough to break rocks. Kurenai exclaimed in her head, before suddenly, I want to eat off those abs. Her thoughts took a turn to the gutter and she began blushing brightly at the memory of his abs. I want him. Thought of brightly blushing Makoto, I want him bad. I want him to hold me in those arms. I want him to rub my body with those big hands. Continued a still brightly blushing Makoto. I wonder if down there is big too. Hitomi's mind was completely blank as she was blushing up a storm, except for one thought, big. For you see, Hitomi used her Byakugan when Naruto was walking by and got a glimpse of his so-called little friend. Only thing was, it wasn't so little. Come on. We all know that they would use it to check out people through their clothes. I want to rub those abs, thought Yugao. I want to rub them, lick them, and eat off of them. Yeah, her mind's gone. Inside classroom, the classroom was filled with some light, but excited chatter. All the students were grouped together with their friends talking to each other. But, one group had the attention of everyone else. This group was made up of all the clan heirs save for one people. Within this group, however, were 5 people who were known as the next generation of Ice Queens. Those people are known as Naruto Uzumaki, Yakumo Kurama, Hinata Hyuga, Satsuki Uchiha, and Kira Inuzuka. These five were inseparable ever since they were kids and all began training together. Naruko had changed over the years. She still had her straight, long red hair, only currently it wasn't in a ponytail and instead was held in a braid over her shoulder. She had soft pink lips, violet eyes that held strength and kindness in them. She was wearing a bigger, sleeveless version of her old battle kimono, only now it hugged her now D-cup. She wore black form-fitting pants with her dual pouch still on her right thigh and had black shinobi sandals. She earned the title of Red-Headed Ice Queen because of her beauty and always turning down dates. A new addition to her outfit was the katana that currently were tied to her hip. It was approximately 30 inches in length with the blade portion being approximately 23.5 inches long. The guard on the sword was bronze and in the shape of a dragon. The sheath had a dragon design as well. It has a red-colored sheath with a gold dragon. The grip is white with the actual wrapping around the handle being red. Hanging from the pommel tied with a string was a metal flower charm. However, it was not always like this and had in fact been just a small orb of metal until it was in Naruko's hands. That was when it changed into the sword it is now. That had always been a strange occurrence for Naruko and her mother. The sword had just one day arrived on their door and with a note that read, for the daughter to reforge the connection to the lost son. Until Naruko had actually grabbed the sword and it changed, they had been stumped on what the note meant. But now, they definitely knew who the lost son was and they would reconnect with him. They even planned that if he didn't have a teacher, they would teach him in order to spend time with him. As the class was talking about random things since most of it was civilians, the Shinobi clan group were talking about the distinct possibility of a certain red-streaked blonde making an appearance. So what do you guys think? Asked Choji Akamichi. Choji has a rotund build and swirl markings on his cheeks similar to the rest of his clan. He currently has a red suit with plates armor on his torso, arms and upper legs while having the kanji for food on the front shoku while also wearing stud earrings in his ears. I doubt that loser will be here, if he is even still alive, came the arrogant voice of Sasuke Uchiha, older twin brother of Satsuki Uchiha. Sasuke has black hair with a blue tiny shaped like a duck's butt and black eyes. He is wearing dark blue pants, over which hangs a blue cloth that covers him from his stomach to his knees, which he secures with a gray rope and black shinobi sandals. Covering his torso is a gray zippered, high collar, short-sleeved shirt with blue wrist warmers. Shut up, Sasuke, came the reply from his twin sister, Satsuki Uchiha. Satsuki looks almost exactly like her brother with some differences. She has the same color hair and eyes but her hair is styled in a ponytail with some hair sticking out in the front, and she has soft, pink lips. She was wearing a black battle kimono similar to Naruko's but was black with white trimmings instead. She has black anbu pants on and black shinobi sandals, all of which do nothing to hide her impressive D-cup or shapely rear. Like Naruko, she also has a sword. It is a black chikudo with no guard. No one here wants to listen to you go on your little power trip, continued Satsuki, and besides, Naruko and her mom still believe he is alive, so if there is a chance, don't crush people's hope with your superiority complex. Sasuke glared at Satsuki. It is not a complex when you know that some nobody who ran away from their clan and was weak when they did is probably still weak, growled Sasuke arrogantly. Whatever floats your boat, Satsuki said, while rolling her. Before she then focused on her friend Hinata who looked like she was holding out on something. What's got you looking so nervous, Hinata? Don't you think we'll pass and that Naruto will show up? Satsuki questioned, which quickly got all attention on her. Hinata Hyuga is the clan heiress for the Hyuga clan. She has dark blue hair cut in a harem style reaching her lower back and shoulder-length strands framing her face. She has the traditional white eyes of the Hyuga clan with a lavender tinted to them. She wears a loose-fitting, lavender and cream hooded jacket with lavender cuffs over mesh armor that shows her well-developed G-cup. She also wears navy blue pants and black, low-heeled sandals. Hinata, upon noticing all attention was on her, from her group, blushed red. Well, I know Naruto is alive because he helped me out a few years ago and I saw him leave the V village then come back again during the past 6 years. Hinata said, thinking about the time they were kids and he protected her from the bullies, whilst only slightly stuttering. Quote. What? The group exclaimed somewhat quietly so as to not draw attention to themselves and leave the other conversations alone. What do you mean he left the village and came back? asked Kira Inuzuka and Ino Yamanaka at the same time. Kira Inuzuka was the clan heiress of the Inuzuka clan only because her sister didn't want to. She has the traditional wild Inuzuka look with wild hair and slit pupils and the traditional fang tattoos on each cheek. She has thick brown hair that goes down to her upper rear, enlarged canines that jut out slightly from underneath her lips. She wears a zipped-up, hooded, sleeveless tan coat with dark brown fur lining the hood that hugs her D-cup. Black fingerless gloves that have dark brown fur also lining the wrist. Black shinobi sandals, and black, form-fitting short shorts with her ninja pouch behind her waist under her coat, and sitting next to her is her Ninken partner Akamaru, who is a big white furred dog. For image of Kiba, look up Naruto Kiba genderbend, and look for the image that has a green background with white hearts and says, Kiba, in a red heart and Shino in a green heart, and that is the version I am using. Ino Yamanaka is the clan heiress of the Yamanaka clan. She has fair skin, light blue-green eyes, and platinum blonde hair that she wears in a ponytail that goes down to her waist and has bangs that cover the right half of her face with a red clip. She wears a short, sleeveless purple shirt that exposes her midriff and hugs her E-cup. She wears a purple skirt and mesh armor on her thighs, elbows and knees, with black shinobi sandals and stud earrings. Just look up her regular Shippuden outfit along with everyone else with some minor changes due to timing. I am mean. He left the village 3 years ago, and he came back last week. Hinata said. So that's what you meant, said Naruto, and you say he came back last week. Hinata nodded her head before suddenly blushing bright red. Regular Hinata level blush minus the fainting, that will come later. Why are you blushing, Hinata? Asked Sakura. Sakura Haruno is the daughter of a civilian councilman, however, she, along with her mother, don't share her father's views on Naruto and her family. Sakura has fair skin, short pink hair held with a white ribbon, and emerald green eyes. She wears a red sleeveless red top with white seam, that hugs against her E-cup bust. Black gloves, gray elbow protectors, low heel, knee-high boots, and black shorts that hug her impressive as underneath a short gray apron skirt. Well, stuttered Hinata. When I saw him coming back to the V village, he was wrapped in bandages, but he looked so tall and muscular. Hinata stuttered all while looking like her head was about to burst from all of the blood being pumped to it. Seriously? Yakumo asked incredulously. I mean, I know it's been years since you saw him and most of us don't know him except for old pictures, but I don't think he could change that much, said Yakumo. Before anyone could reply, Iruka Yumino walked in, and everyone quieted down. Well, it's nice to see I don't have to say anything to get you brats to shut up anymore. Iruka said while having a teasing smile which made everyone lightly blush in embarrassment. Now, before we begin, I want to introduce a student who has been away for the past several years training and has come back today. Everyone began wondering and whispering with their neighbor on who this mysterious person was, until Iruka raised his hand and everyone stopped and paid attention. Now, I know you're all curious about who this person is, so I will just let him in now, alright? Said Iruka, before he went to open the door. Once the door was opened, they all saw who it was, and the girls began blushing, and drooling with hearts in their eyes, while the guys all glared with jealousy about the red-streaked blonde that just walked in. He went to the front of the class and said with a calm smile, Hello, everyone. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I am going to be graduating with all of you. Before anyone could react, Naruto was tackled into a hug by a certain redhead. It's you. It's really you. Cried Naruto all while still hugging her older brother who now towered over her and the rest of the class. This scene of the red-headed ice queen, hugging and crying over a stranger, shocked everyone and caused all the guys to get even more jealous at the fact that she was displaying affection to person. Naruto for his part was surprised at this reaction before he suddenly looked confused. He started awkwardly, who are you? He asked curious of who this redhead was and awkwardly because of the sudden display of affection. Remember he was 7 when he left, and is now 16 and has not seen his sister since then. Naruto eeked, before she hurriedly let go while blushing. This caused further shock at the redhead blushing and making such a cute sound. Naruto calmed herself and stood up straight while looking him in the eyes with a smile and said, It's me, Naruto. Your little sister. Naruto looked confused for a brief second, which made Naruto sad, before realization struck his features and he got a big, grinning smile on his face, one that made Naruto slightly worry, before giving her a big hug, lifting her off the ground. All while shouting, "Little tomato." All of you know that if Naruto had a little sister with red hair, he would do something stupid like that. This further shocked everyone because of two things. First, he called her tomato, which no one can do without being sent to the hospital. And second, all Naruto did was blush before she began to lightly beat on his head with her cheeks puffed while shouting, "Mo, I've told you before to not call me that." Think the reaction a chibi anime character gets when they puff their cheeks and begin flailing their arms. All Naruto did was laugh with while putting her down, so now she could only beat his chest because of the height difference. Which she now realized, feels very firm, and her face was now the same color as her hair. Everyone was slack-jawed at the interaction between the two siblings, all except for the group of clan heirs and heiresses and civilian councilwoman daughter. They looked on with smiles for their friend except for two people, but both for different reasons. Shino Aburame was being his normal, expressionless self, like all Aburame, which is why he isn't smiling, but he is happy for his friend. Shino is like all Aburame and show no emotion. He has bushy brown hair, narrow eyes, and is the second tallest of his class now that Naruto has arrived. He wears dark sunglasses, a sea green jacket with a high upturned collar that hangs down to his knees, with a hood that obscures his face even more. And he has a satchel on his back. Sasuke, however, was instead sneering at Naruto for taking the attention of the girl who he believed belonged to him because she could give him strong children for the future. I know I am doing a lot of these author notes, but come on. We all know Sasuke's arrogant, emo would think something like that. For those who want to read a story kinda like that, look up, In the Same Household, by Delt Shadow 35 or, Naruto Master of Kunoichi, also by Delt Shadow 35. Both are heavy in for those who focus on that, but they both do show Naruto's family being hit on by Sasuke, who believes they should be with him. The guys of the group were slightly envious of his build. All of the girls, however, were blushing heavily and slightly drooling. Except for Kira, who, just like her sister earlier, which she will find out later, was in pseudo heat and was currently lusting after Naruto, at least until Akamaru smacked her out of it. Literally, he smacked her in the back of the head with his tail before she wound up like her sister. Only unlike her sister, she doesn't have the control to prevent herself from trying to jump his bones. She sent a thankful look at Akamaru, with a still heavy blush on her face, which he nodded back at her as if to say, "No problem." Ino and Sakura were blushing heavily, with hearts in their eyes, about to go back to their fangirlish ways. However, before they did that, they raised their arms and smacked each other, knowing that the other would do the same after they realized what was happening. They both rubbed their heads before looking at each other and nodding to the other in thanks for snapping the other out of it. Yakumo and Hinata were both standing silent, with their faces looking as if they were about to burst into fire. They both looked at each other and knew that the other was on the verge of fainting, but they ended up fainting before they could pinch each other to stop themselves from fainting. Iruka, having enough of the meet and greet, tried to get everyone to settle down. "All right, everyone, please settle down so we can begin." His calm voice was overruled by everyone still talking about Naruto, how hot he is, fangirls, or what his workout is to get that kind of body so they can get ladies as well, hopeless guys. I said settle down. The legendary Big Head no Jutsu was infamous for being able to quiet down even the noisiest of students. It worked its magic as the entire classroom had anticlimactically went silent, much to Iruka's pleasure. He looked over at Naruto, who was still standing and didn't even look fazed by the Big Head no Jutsu, which surprised him. "All right, Naruto, now can you please take a seat over there?" Iruka said while pointing at the empty seat in between Ino and Naruto. "Once you've done that, we can begin the written test." Naruto calmly nodded his head before walking over to the seat and sat down. He looked over at Naruto and gave her an encouraging smile that said, "Good luck," while nodding his head before doing the same to Ino. Both of whom began to blush brightly, while all of the other girls in the class looked on with jealousy. Once Naruto was seated and everyone was quiet, Iruka passed out the papers with his assistant Mizuki, who had been glaring at Naruto ever since he walked into the classroom. "So, you've returned, demon," thought Mizuki with disgust and malice. "Now I can put my plan into action using you as the scapegoat and get the power I was promised from Orochimaru-sama for bringing him the Forbidden Scroll." Once the test was passed out, the students were told they have half an hour to complete the test. Naruto was the first to complete the test in 5 minutes and relaxed in his seat while waiting for the time to pass. Once everyone was done, Iruka and Mizuki collected the tests and headed outside for the last 3 parts of the exam. Once they made it outside, the adults, who were waiting for the students to come outside, all began silently watching the students, while mentally cheering for their respective children or student and hoping that the demon will fail. Alright, said Iruka, the next part is shuriken and kunai throwing. To pass you need a total of 11 points minimum. Each shuriken and kunai that hits the target is a point and there is a way to get extra points, but I'll let you figure that part out. Iruka explained. Once that was done, he began to call everyone up, one by one, to get their 10 shuriken and then their 10 kunai. Once that was done, they all began to throw the shuriken and kunai at the targets, and Iruka recorded their scores. Shino Aburame, shuriken, 6/10, kunai, 8/10. Total score, 14/20. Choji Akamichi, shuriken, 7/10, kunai, 8/10. Total score, 15/20. Shikamaru Nara, shuriken, 5/10, kunai, 6/10. Total score 11/20. Ino Yamanaka, shuriken, 6/10, kunai, 7/10. Total score, 13/20. Sakura Haruno, shuriken, 7/10, kunai, 6/10. Total score, 13/20. Yukumo Kurama sad face plus 2 points. Shuriken, 5/10, kunai, 5/10. Total score 10/20 plus 2 points equals 12/20. Kira Inuzuka sad face plus 1 point. Shuriken, 7/10, kunai, 5/10. Total score, 12/20 plus 1 point equals 13/20. Hinata Hyuga sad face plus 1 point. Shuriken, 8/10, kunai, 8/10. Total score, 16/20 plus 1 point equals 17/20. Naruko Uzumaki sad face plus 2 points. Shuriken, 9/10, kunai, 8/10. Total score, 17/20 plus 2 points equals 19/20. Satsuki Uchiha sad face plus 2 points. Shuriken, 8/10, kunai, 9/10. Total score, 17/20 plus 2 points equals 19/20. Sasuke Uchiha sad face plus 2 points. Shuriken, 9/10, kunai, 10 out of 10. Total score, 19/20 plus 2 points equals 21/20. Once Sasuke was told his score, he looked right at Naruto with a condescending look and said, HMPH, beat that loser. Naruto calmly waited with his arms crossed and only glanced at Sasuke before looking at the targets again. This was something that pissed off Sasuke because he was trying to see if could rile up Naruto in order to make him mess up, but instead, his attempts were brushed off, as if they were nothing. Alright, Naruto Uzumaki, it's your turn. Iruka called, making Naruto calmly walk over, before taking the shuriken and kunai from Mizuki. Naruto got into a stance ready to throw them. Before he threw them, however, he noticed they were blunted. Iruka-sensei, these are blunted, calmly stated Naruto, which surprised Iruka before he walked over and inspected them. Finding that Naruto was right in that they were blunted, which would make it impossible to stick to the target. Sorry about that, Naruto, apologized Iruka. Give me those and I will lend you some of mine. Iruka offered. However, he and everyone watching was surprised when Naruto shook head and said, no, it's fine. I just wanted to let you know. Alright, then if that's all, you can take your turn. Iruka said. Everyone watched as Naruto took his stance again. Naruto stood with his left foot forward, right foot back and knees bent. He had his right arm back with his hand bent in and his left arm curved in front of him. In his right hand were all of the shuriken and in his left hand were 9 of the kunai and the last was in his mouth. Everyone watched as Naruto suddenly flung his left arm back and right arm forward while at the same time throwing the shuriken. Even after he let the shuriken go, he didn't stop moving as he began to flip and jump all in place all while still spinning. Everyone watched as he continued to let the kunai fly and then he back flipped and let the last kunai go flying. Once he landed, everyone looked at the training dummies and saw that not all of the shuriken and kunai struck the targets, but were buried halfway deep in the dummies. At first, everything was silent before all of the civilian parents, students, and Sasuke started laughing at Naruto, but the only ones who stayed silent were the ones with shinobi training in the crowd and Sakura, because they knew from either experience or reading Sakura that all the spots that Naruto hits were either instant kill or fatal wounds that would kill you within seconds or minutes without medical aid. Iruka looked at all of the students laughing, and then, shut up, Iruka shouted, using the big head no jutsu, as he was getting fed up with these civilians laughing when they didn't even hear the score. After everyone stopped laughing, and paid attention to Iruka, who still looked pissed that everyone was laughing when he hadn't even said the score yet. Iruka finally calmed down, and looked at Naruto with a calm yet proud smile. "Well, Naruto," began Iruka, "I have to say that was by far the most amazing display of agility I have seen in a while." "Thank you," said Naruto while nodding his head. "Now, before I give you your score, I have to ask," said Iruka, walking over to the training dummies that still had shuriken and kunai embedded in them, "why did you throw all of the shuriken and kunai in these areas?" asked Iruka, generally curious on what Naruto's answer will be. Before Naruto could answer though, Sasuke arrogantly said, "Probably because he doesn't know what a target is and threw them at random." This caused a look of disappointment to cross Makoto's face, who was watching from the crowd, at her son's stupidity, and embarrassment to cross Satsuki's face at being related to such a damn dumbass. "Actually, Sasuke," began Naruto, "I threw them in those specific spots because every single one would have either been an instant kill upon impact, or a fatal wound that would cause death either within seconds, or minutes," calmly stated Naruto, who then looked at Sasuke with a disappointed look on his face and said, "And the fact that you don't know that must mean you have done a piss-poor job at studying the human body for impact points that inflict the most damage." This caused everyone to look at Naruto in shock that he knew something and Sasuke didn't. Before anyone could say anything else, Iruka clapped his hands to gather everyone's attention again. "Alright everyone, now that that is done, we can now move on to the taijutsu segment of the exam before we finish with the jutsu section," Iruka said, as everyone began walking towards the open grounds, before Naruto remembered something. "Hey, Iruka-sensei, what was Naruto's score?" Naruto asked, curious on what her brother's score was, which now had everyone wondering what his total was. Iruka for his part began sheepishly laughing while rubbing the back of his neck. Oh right. How silly of me. I forgot to put it up after all of that drama." Naruto Uzumaki's sad face, plus 20 points. Shuriken. 10 out of 10. Kunai. 10 out of 10. Total score. 20 plus 20 points equals 40/20ths. When everyone saw that score, they went slack-jawed at never having seen such a score before. Everyone started staring at Naruto, who was still walking to the open training grounds when he felt people staring at him. He turned around to see everyone staring at him with dropped jaws, before he shrugged his shoulders and simply said, "What?" That snapped everyone out of it before they began moving to the training grounds for their taijutsu tests. Once everyone was there, Iruka explained how he would call a student. They will then stand across from Mizuki and get ready to fight. Once Iruka starts the fight, they will continue for either 5 minutes or until Mizuki is taken down. After the rules were explained, Mizuki went to his spot and waited for everyone to be called. As everyone was called up, they began their fights. The civilian students barely passed the 5 mark, whereas, the clan heirs and heiresses, along with Sakura, were able to knock down Mizuki. Then before anyone knew it, the only ones left were the Uchiha twins and the 2 Uzumaki children. "Alright, next is Satsuki Uchiha," stated Iruka. Satsuki nodded and moved to stand across from Mizuki before she got into her clan's signature, Interceptor Fist, taijutsu stance. Mizuki got ready as well, and when Iruka gave the signal, Mizuki charged at Satsuki, while Satsuki waited. Once Mizuki was within range, he launched a right hook at Satsuki which she blocked with her left arm and launched her right fist forward and landed a hit on his torso which sent Mizuki back a foot before she advanced and launched kick to his head that he blocked but was a distraction for another kick to his stomach which knocked him down to the ground and she pinned him. "Alright Satsuki, well done," congratulated Iruka. "Your timing was perfect in waiting for Mizuki to make the opening move which is beneficial to your clan's style which requires patience and timing before blocking or dodging and counter-attacking," Iruka explained, which Satsuki listened to closely and then bowed while saying, "Thank you," and then she walked back over to the other students and sat down next to Naruto before sending her a look that said, "Beat that." Naruto saw the look and bristled before waiting patiently and anxiously for her turn. "Next is Naruto Uzumaki," said Iruka. Naruto got up and walked over to stand across from Mizuki, before she got in her stance which had her standing with her left foot forward, right leg back, knees slightly bent, left arm crossed forward with her left elbow pointing in Mizuki's direction and her left hand open as if to perform a chop, and her right arm at her hip and her right hand closed into a fist. Once Iruka started the fight, she charged at Mizuki and launched a left roundhouse at his head, which he blocked using both arms but was not ready for her right leg that came up when she performed a backflip kick that landed on his chin as he was knocked down. She then proceeded to pin his arms behind his back with her knee before grabbing his chin and the crown of his head with her hands, effectively preventing any movement. "Alright Naruto, excellent job," Iruka said, signaling Naruto to stand back up after letting go of Mizuki and look at Iruka. "That was a very good job of taking your opponent's attention away and having it focus on a specific movement before using another move to take down your opponent. And the way you pinned him was one of the most effective pins, as it takes away the use of your opponent's arms and gives you the chance to easily snap his neck, which takes away any thoughts of attempting to escape." "Thank you, Iruka-sensei," said Naruto, before she walked back to the students and looked at Satsuki with a smug look that made Satsuki bristle this time. "Alright, Sasuke Uchiha, you're up." Sasuke simply hef it, before moving into position, also standing in his clan's taijutsu stance. Iruka started the match and Sasuke charged at Mizuki, who launched a kick at Sasuke's head but that was blocked, and Sasuke then sent several punches towards Mizuki's torso, before tripping him and pinning him. "Alright Sasuke, that's enough," said Iruka, causing Sasuke to look at him and then get up. "That was an excellent way of turning your family's interceptor fist into an offensive fighting style, but that was far too much aggression that was used in your advance. Try to control that temper of yours," Iruka explained, causing Sasuke to sneer at him before walking back to the other students, ignoring everyone while glaring at Naruto. He was still upset that he didn't react to his tauntings earlier. "And finally, Naruto Uzumaki," said Iruka with a calm smile. Naruto simply nodded and stood up before making his way over across from Mizuki, who began glaring at him. Naruto boredly looked at Mizuki, which pissed him off, before taking out a red headband with black flames and tying it around his eyes, shocking everyone, before calmly crossing his arms across his chest, which made them look bigger. This made Sasuke and Mizuki believe he has given up, but confused Iruka. Naruto, aren't you going to get ready?" Iruka asked, completely confused on Naruto's actions, as well as everyone else except for Mizuki, Sasuke, and the civilian villagers, who all believed he had given up and was going to simply stand there and take his beating like the demon he is. "I am ready," answered Naruto calmly. "I simply have no need to use my eyes for this fight because he won't land a finger me," Naruto said, while pointing at Mizuki, causing everyone to think he was either that confident or that arrogant in his abilities, but caused Mizuki to get pissed off. "Oh. Okay," Iruka replied slowly, still a little unsure if Naruto was that strong, but he wasn't here to question the boy, so he simply started the match. "So, you really think I won't be able to land a finger on you, huh?" sneered Mizuki, thinking that the demon should have just died somewhere in a hole and never returned. "I don't think you won't land a finger on me, I know you won't," calmly replied Naruto, not moving an inch. "Oh yeah, well, we'll see about that," Mizuki shouted before charging at Naruto, who continued to stand there. Once Mizuki was in range, he launched a kick towards Naruto's head. Mizuki began thinking that he hit him when the kick was only an inch away, until suddenly, he was staring at the sky. Mizuki was confused on what just happened, while everyone else was as well. All they saw was Mizuki about to kick Naruto in the head, and then suddenly he's on the floor laying on his back. The only one who wasn't confused was Kushina, because she knew what had happened and had wide eyes. Which was not missed by the rest of her group. "Kushina, what just happened?" questioned Hitomi, as she had caught part of what happened, but all she really saw was a blur of movement before the scene before them appeared. The group of adults looked at Kushina, who looked on with mixture of surprise, pride, and curiosity, as Naruto continued to stand in the same place in the same position while Mizuki slowly began to get up from the floor behind him, where he was previously lying down. What happened was that Naruto made his move, Kushina said, which confused the group as they hadn't seen him move from his spot. "But he's still in the same spot, so how could he have made his move?" asked a confused Sume, who recently returned with Hana after they changed and got a hold of themselves. Kushina shook her head at them with a proud smile and explained, "It's not that he didn't move, it's just that he moved so fast, that to everyone watching, it looked like Mizuki just suddenly appeared on the floor." Kushina explained, being the only one to be able to move that fast other than Naruto himself, making the group's eyes widen at that. Flashback to moments ago. Sensing Mizuki's foot about to hit him, Naruto smoothly raised his arm, grabbed Mizuki's ankle and flipped him over his shoulder to the ground without moving from his spot. Flashback end. How is he able to move that fast though? Suum asked the question that was on all of their minds. Kushina then looked deep in thought while still looking at Naruto, who still had not moved from his spot or changed his stance. The only way I know of to get that fast is to go through years of intense gravity training, but even then, it's not something that a regular teenager can attempt with being destroyed by the training. Kushina said, momentarily forgetting that Naruto was not a regular teenager. What about the fox? Hitomi asked, reminded the group, who all then went wide-eyed at that information. Suum was the first to react. You're right. With the fox being sealed inside of him, giving him its regenerative properties, and his crazy stamina, he would be able to adjust to any training given within in a few hours and at most a few days. Suum said, realizing that Naruto would be able to withstand the great amounts of pressure and weight needed to get the training done and still be alive and well. Back with Naruto. Naruto still stood in his spot waiting for Mizuki to get up and try to attack him again. Mizuki got up and glared at Naruto for the embarrassment he is going through. What did you do? Shouted Mizuki, wondering what Naruto did so he could get his power, with Sasuke listening closely, wondering the same thing for the same reason. Answering calmly, Naruto said, I just moved and flipped you over my shoulder when you attacked and were within my range. Mizuki got mad thinking Naruto was making fun of him, and shouted, lies. You never moved. Of course I did, Naruto calmly replied, I just moved so fast that you didn't register what happened. I can move slower if you want so that Iruka can see that I am using taijutsu and so that you can't complain that I am cheating. This pissed off Mizuki thinking that Naruto was making fun of him, and this caused him to start attacking at a random and wild pace. All the while, everyone saw that Naruto was only dodging and redirecting the attacks, which surprised everyone at the level of skill that he was using. While this was going on, the rest of the group, that will later be known as the Rookie 12, were watching with amazed expressions, except for Shino for obvious reasons, and Sasuke, who was glaring at Naruto while trying to memorize his moves and techniques, but they were too random and erratic to be copied. Naruto, who had finally had enough, decided to end the fight in the easiest way possible for him that would still provide power. Naruto reared his right hand over his left shoulder and backhanded Mizuki across the grounds and straight into the wall of the academy, where only the bottom half of Mizuki could be seen with the random twitching of his legs, showing that he was knocked out. The adults and shinobi stared in amazement and shock at the level of strength needed to accomplish such a feat. The students were looking on with the same reactions, with Sasuke looking on in jealousy at the strength and power that Naruto had. Holy shit, he just gave Mizuki the godly bitch slap. One of the male students exclaimed in shock. After this little display of power, Mizuki was removed from the wall and sent to the hospital where he would be healed and returned in an hour, so the students were given this hour as a chance to take a break and talk with each other, with their family coming over to talk as well. The group of the future Rookie 12 all went and talked with their family except for Sasuke, who went and brooded by a tree. As Naruto was talking with his sister, he was unaware of a group of people who were coming up to the both of them. Hello again, Sochi, said a voice behind Naruto that caused him to go wide-eyed and slowly look behind him to see his mother staring back at him with a loving smile and nothing but love and pride in her eyes. Hello again, Ka-san, replied Naruto, still staring at her in shock at how she was looking at him. How have you been, Sochi? Kushina asked, wanting to know how her son has been the past several years, along with everyone else. I've been good, Naruto said with a smile, having snapped out of his shock. What have you been up to for all these years, Naruto-kun? Makoto asked, wondering what he has done over the years along with the rest of the group and their children. Well, I've just been training and living in the Forest of Death, where I got a bunch of pets, and I actually came back to the village on 2 occasions. Naruto said, making everyone look at him, wondering when he did and why. When did you come back, Naruto-kun? Asked Suum, which got Naruto to smirk at her, which made all of them to blush at how handsome he looked before he looked at Makoto and Hitomi. Well, haven't you ever wondered how Aunt Makoto is a survivor or how Hitomi survived her illness? Naruto asked, which got everyone to look at him in surprise. Wait, said Makoto and Hitomi, you're the reason why we're still alive. Yeah, Naruto started to explain, I was in the village, planning on getting some minor revenge on the Yondaime by spraying itching powder in his office through the vents, when I heard him along with those old advisors summon Itachi. I was curious about what was going on, so I decided to sit still and listen in on what was going on. As I was listening, I heard them ask Itachi how the issue with the Uchiha clan was going. When he said that the issue had gotten worse, the advisors told him that since it didn't get better, to simply eliminate them. Makoto was horrified at what she heard. Then Naruto continued his tale. When I heard this, I was so shocked that they would even suggest something like this. Even Itachi looked shocked before he looked at the Yondaime with a little hope in his eyes that he wouldn't go through with the order. But the Yondaime proved him wrong when he approved of the order instead. Itachi tried to bargain for the lives of the children and your life, Makoto, but the Yondaime said that only Sasuke and Satsuki would be allowed to live. I heard that and remembered the times that you helped me out with some food, so I got out of there as quickly as possible without making noise and rushed over to the Uchiha compound, but when I got there, everyone was already dead. I then sensed Itachi and you in the main house, so turned off my gravity seals that I had on at the time and rushed over just in time to save you, but because I couldn't control my speed at the time, I dropped you off at one of the training ground in your compound and then rushed back to the forest. Naruto finished, getting a surprised and grateful look from Makoto, who smiled at him, which he replied back to with a smile of his own. Once he had finished, everyone, other than Makoto, looked at him in shock before he then looked over at Hitomi and began the next tale. The second time I came back to village, I had actually been traveling kinda close to the Hyuga compound, when I overheard one of those pompous windbags your clan call elders talking about how you've been a threat to their ways and how after tonight the poison would take effect and make it seem like your heart had simply stopped in your sleep. Hitomi was shocked at hearing how the clan elders of her clan would try and plan this. Hearing this, I snuck into your clan compound, into the elders' rooms, looking for what the poison was, when I found that it was a plant that makes your body grow weaker when continuously taken in small amounts over the years. I then went back to the forest and gathered all of the plants I knew that when taken by themselves did nothing, but when mixed together they become an amazing medicine that can expel almost any abnormal effects within your body. Naruto finished his tale, getting amazed looks from everyone at his level of plant knowledge. Hey Naruto, asked Hana with Kira standing next to her. Naruto turned to her, showing she now had his attention, which caused the reaction of her and her sister blushing at the calm look in his eyes that showed hidden strength. Yes, Naruto said, while tilting his head to the side, which got the group to twitch and mentally shout, Kawaii. How did you know what plants were poisonous and when mixed, create a strong medicine instead of a stronger poison? Hana asked. Naruto then looked sheepish before saying, well, I knew they were poisonous because when I started living in the forest, I was looking for food and couldn't find any. This got the group to look at him with sadness for what he went through, with looks of guilt crossing over Naruto's and Kushina's faces for not doing more for him. Naruto saw these looks and felt bad because he knew his mom and sister weren't to blame for how Minato treated him. Naruto then felt worse, realizing the effect what he was about to say next would have on them, so, I just began eating a group of random plants near me, which about a minute later, I fell to the ground seizing up until I passed out. I then woke up the next day alive and well and figured that Kurumi cured my body of the poison. Naruto continued, but before he could continue, Satsuki had caught something when he spoke and decided to ask the question on her mind. However, before she could, Iruka came back and asked all students to come back for the jutsu portion of the exam. Hearing this, the students went back to the field where they all began performing the academy jutsu. Finally, when it was Naruto's turn, he performed the kawarimi and the henge perfectly before surprising everyone when he performed the shadow clone jutsu and made 3 solid clones instead of the regular clone, thus allowing him to pass as well. Later, the group of women and Naruto had gone to Kushina's house in order to celebrate for successfully becoming shinobi of the village. However, before they all went in, they noticed that Naruto had stopped before the gate entrance. The whole group was wondering why he stopped, when Kushina walked up to him and told him, "It's okay, Naruto. You can come in. You can come home." Hearing those words, the group then realized why he had stopped. He was afraid of being rejected again and didn't want to risk the chance that he could have a family again. As for Naruto, he began tearing up when he heard those words and then lunged forward and gave his mom a hug while saying, "I'm home, Ka-san." Kushina then smiled, while also crying and said, "Welcome home, Sochi-kun." The group all began to have tears in their eyes as well, watching as Naruto had finally reconnected with his mother. Before they could all head in, however, Naruto suddenly tensed and turned in the direction of the forest with a serious face. This was not missed by the rest as they were wondering why he was looking in that direction, when suddenly, Naruto began jumping in that direction. Everyone was surprised by his actions and began jumping after him, but they were surprised to see that when they jumped onto a roof, Naruto had already entered the forest, which surprised them all as to how fast he was. They snapped out of it when, a few minutes later, they suddenly felt a huge wave of power come from the forest and then a loud boom with an explosion causing smoke to go high up into the air. Worried for her son, Kushina then began rushing to the forest at her top speed, which snapped everyone else out of their shock and decided to follow. With every one of them thinking, I hope Naruto's okay. When they all got there, they were surprised to find an enormous crater, with Naruto holding the village's forbidden scroll of seals upright in his left hand, a giant shuriken with a broken point stabbed into a tree, and Mizuki kneeling on the ground away from Naruto, clutching his right shoulder because of the missing arm that was laying on the ground away from Mizuki and was bent at all sorts of angles, showing that it would have been broken beyond repair and immensely painful if it was still attached. But another surprise was when they looked at Naruto. He had what looked like gold covering his arms from the tip of his fingers all the way to his shoulders with markings all over his arms, and a fierce, angry look on his face. Then they heard him growl, I'm going to make you pay for what you did to Iruka-sensei and what you said about my family. They then began wondering what had happened before they arrived. 5 minutes before the group arrived, Naruto had sensed Mizuki's chakra moving rapidly from the Hokage tower, and was confused before he then sensed Iruka's chakra meeting Mizuki's before they started pulsing as if they were fighting, when Iruka's suddenly began to drop. This had alarmed him and he decided to see what happened, so he moved at high speeds across the village into the forest and found Iruka. He was shocked to see Iruka laying on the ground in a small puddle of blood, with a giant shuriken sticking out of his back. Naruto rushed over and checked to see if he was still alive and was relieved that he was. Naruto removed the shuriken from Iruka's back and then used a minor healing jutsu to stop the bleeding. With Iruka out of danger, Naruto turned in the direction of Mizuki and disappeared, where he then reappeared in front of Mizuki and saw him holding Konoha's forbidden scroll of seals with a giant shuriken on his back, similar to the one used on Iruka. Mizuki was surprised to see Naruto appear in front of him so suddenly, but then, what luck. I get to steal the village scroll and kill the demon brat. Mizuki thought with malice. He then pulled the other shuriken from his back and got ready to throw it. He then shouted, Die demon! And let loose the shuriken towards Naruto. He believed that the injuries he received earlier from Naruto were a bunch of flukes. However, Naruto surprised him when he simply backhanded the shuriken with his bare fist, causing a point to break and the shuriken to go spinning wildly before lodging itself in a tree. So my suspicion of you was right, you were planning something, said Naruto calmly. To think you would attempt to steal the village's forbidden scroll and attempt to murder Iruka-sensei. What? Shouted Mizuki. What do you mean, demon? You mean to say Iruka is still alive? Is that not what I just said? Naruto asked rhetorically. Man, who knew you were evil and stupid? This made Mizuki mad, so he decided to try and enlighten Naruto to a little secret the village had hidden from him. Hey, did you ever wonder why the villagers hate you? Asked Mizuki, which caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow in curiosity. Seeing this, Mizuki continued, You see, 16 years ago, the Kyuubi no Yoko had attacked the village. The village did its best to fight off the Kyuubi, but we couldn't kill, so the Yondaime decided to seal it up in 2 children. Don't you see, he decided to seal it up in you and your demon whore of a sister. Mizuki saw Naruto had lowered his head and that his eyes were now shadowed. Thinking that he had an opening, Mizuki took a kunai out and began charging at Naruto in order to stab him in the head. However, when he was halfway there, he sensed a large amount of chakra suddenly coming from above him and looked up to see Naruto with a face of rage, his arms covered in gold from his shoulders to his fingers with markings all over them and his right arm back to launch an attack. Naruto then launched his arm forward to strike Mizuki. This caused a massive explosion to occur, and when the smoke cleared, it revealed a massive crater in the ground with Mizuki kneeling and clutching his shoulder because he was missing his right arm, which was several meters away and bent in all sorts of angles, showing that it was used to try and block the attack but was completely shattered and severed by the tremendous force from the punch. It then showed Naruto, who was standing while holding the scroll with his left hand and his still clenched right fist, with both still covered in gold. This was what the group saw when they showed up and heard what Naruto said. They then saw Naruto look over at them with a fierce but calm look on his face, which made him look even more handsome and caused them all to blush. They snapped out of it when they saw Naruto toss the scroll towards them, which was caught by Naruto. They then heard Naruto speak, Hold that until the Anbu show up while I deal with this traitor. They then saw Naruto turn back to Mizuki before he stepped forward and suddenly disappeared from view. Everyone in the clearing began looking for him, the women in curiosity and Mizuki in fear, before they heard a large boom and felt a shockwave and turned to see Naruto had just uppercut Mizuki with enough force to cause a shockwave of air before Mizuki was launched into the air. Naruto watched Mizuki for a second, before he then stepped forward again with his right foot forward and bent his leg before jumping after Mizuki with so much force, the ground shattered and sent another shockwave. He then appeared above Mizuki with his ready to launch a kick but was covered in what looked like a black metallic material. Then they saw Naruto lose his kick with a shout of, "Savage Blade Kick." Once Naruto's kick made contact with Mizuki's body, there was a big flash of black energy with a red outline that caused everyone to shield their eyes from the big blast of wind that suddenly blasted through when Mizuki made contact with the ground, also causing the ground to crater even more. The dust began to settle, allowing the group to see that Mizuki had been blown deep into the ground and was actually severed in half at the waist. They heard multiple people landing in the clearing and turned around to reveal Minato, several Anbu, and what looked like a young woman with red hair and slitted eyes. The Anbu and Minato all looked surprised at the damage and the woman appeared to be very proud for some reason. Before anyone could say anything, they then heard a loud crash and turned to see that it was Naruto who had landed and was currently crouched with his eyes shadowed before he stood, with his arms at his sides and slightly back with his left hand slightly clenched and his right hand in a complete fist, and his mouth open to allow steam to be leaking from the corners of his mouth, and his eyes were revealed and they showed massive amounts of power and strength in them. To all of the men, they were envious of how badass Naruto looked, and to the women, they were all blushing up a storm and feeling slightly wet, very in the cases of Anko, Hana, Sum, and Kira, at how powerful and handsome he looked. He then relaxed his stance and breathed deeply before releasing it to finally calm down and turn towards the current audience. Before anyone could say anything, however, the young woman with red slitted eyes glomped Naruto while shouting his name and then shocked everyone when she kissed him on the lips while wrapping her arms around his neck, and they saw him returning it while wrapping his arms around her waist. Naruto, who was feeling immensely jealous of the girl, along with all of the other women present, stepped forward and shouted, "Hey! Who are you and why are you kissing my brother?" The young woman broke the kiss and let go of Naruto as he did the same, and she turned around and looked at the group before answering, "Why, I'm his mate, of course, so why wouldn't I be allowed to kiss him?" She asked rhetorically. Minato then stepped forward and said, "What is your name?" The young women sneered at him before saying, well, if it isn't the garbage Yondaime. I haven't seen you in since you sealed me away." This received looks of surprise before Minato shouted, "Who are you and how do you me?" The young woman simply chuckled before replying, "I know you because you sealed me away 16 years ago, and as for who I am." Once she said that, the young woman was then covered in a puff of smoke that cleared and revealed the woman still standing there but with fox ears on top of her head and 9 tails swishing behind her body, all covered in reddish-orange fur with black fur tips. "My name is Kurumi, the Kyuubi no Yoko, and mate to Naruto Uzumaki, one of the Yonko, 4 emperors, and reincarnation of the god of wrath, Asura, and reincarnation of Ashura, one of the 2 sons of the Sage of 6 Paths." The group was wide-eyed at hearing that this was the Kyuubi and that she was the mate of Naruto, who, even though they didn't understand what one of those titles mean, they understood too. Naruto was the reincarnation of one of the sons of the Sage of 6 Paths and of a god of wrath. Nobody knew what to do now, but one thing was for certain. They would never get on Naruto's bad side. Hello everyone, I just wanted to say again that I am very happy seeing all of the favorites and follows. Now, notes. First off, I would just like to remind everyone that I will be posting a list of the harem that I have currently a little after this. Second, just because I am posting it does not mean I am not taking requests for girls for the harem. If you have a request, either put it in the reviews or send me a PM. Third, I am also taking ideas on any powers and possible weapons that Naruto will have in use. If you think that Naruto should have a certain weapon or power from any anime, cartoon, movie, or video game, let me know in the reviews, or as I said before, send me a PM. Fourth, if you have any ideas or challenges on stories that you would like, send me a PM or place it in the reviews and I will see it and write it down to see how to make it happen. Finally, if you do send me a PM and I do not answer right away, do not be discouraged. I just do not have a computer to use, so I can reply, and I use the one at my school to work on these and upload, and I use my phone to also work on them. So again, do not think I am ignoring you. If I do not answer, that just means I am not anywhere near a computer at the current time. It has been 3 days since the reveal of Kurumi being the Kyuubi no Yoko, at the same time as her being Naruto's mate, with him being the reincarnation of a god of wrath and of a son of the sage of six paths. Everyone was surprised at Naruto, of all people being something so important, especially when they were finally told that Yonko means four emperors. The group who took Kushina's side, which were a good portion of the female shinobi force, and the clan heads with their clans, were all amazed at how much of an important figure Naruto became. The civilian council, Minato, and the advisors all didn't care about him, only that his prestige could be used, and when they are done with him, they would have him sealed away. Currently, Naruto can be seen training in the Uzumaki training grounds, working on controlling his strength and speed by wearing gravity seal, enhanced weights that spread the weight all over the body instead of just weighing down the limb. He currently was wearing the equivalent to 120 tons at 30 times Earth's gravity, and he was currently trying to get used to moving right now, as he was kinda doing a walking crouch around the training ground and was breaking a heavy sweat, as the farthest he'd gone was 100 tons at 25 times Earth's gravity. Basically how Goku walks whenever he uses a new gravity setting in the gravity room. Off to the side, watching Naruto were Kushina, Naruko, Kurami, and Anko, who were all wearing blushes on their faces except Kurami, who had a look of lust that matched Anko's. The reason being that Naruto was doing all of these exercises shirtless, so the four women could all clearly see his toned, rock-hard abs, chest, back, and arms as he moved. They watched as slowly moved around the grounds and were still surprised to see him moving at all with the amount of weight he has added to himself, which would have crushed any normal person from the amount of force needed to even move a few steps. The fact Naruto was moving so much while only sweating heavily was astounding to Kushina, Naruko, and Anko. When Naruto was at least able to stand up all the way, he began to do actual workouts like sit-ups, push-ups, and the like, until he was a little more accustomed. Then he would begin to practice his katas and movement to increase his speed. As Naruto was doing his push-ups, Naruko decided to ask something that had been on her mind for a while. So, began Naruko, gaining the attention of the other women, how did you get out of the seal exactly? This got the attention of Kushina and Anko, who finally looked away from Naruto, who had moved on to sit-ups, as they were interested in finding out how that happened as well. Kurami glanced at them before returning to watching Naruto do his workouts before saying, I got out of the seal by mixing my chakra with his. This let me be out physically, but most of my power is still inside of him. Kurami then shows a mark that looks like a fox surrounded by a ring of flaming chains. This mark is basically proof that while I am out here, my power is still locked and can only be regulated by Naruto. The trio nodded their heads, when Kushina asked, how do you mix your chakra with his? Through physical contact, I was able to mix our chakras, which confused the seal just enough for me to create this body to be out here. The only thing I needed to do was leave a large portion of my power so that the seal would still think I'm there. Kurami explained. Kushina and Naruko understood this and both nodded their heads. Anko, however, asked something that the previous two missed. So, what did you do for physical contact? This caused the grounds to be silent except for the sounds of Naruto counting his reps. Kushina and Naruko turned to Kurami, who had a light blush as she continued watching Naruto, trying to ignore the looks she was receiving. She glanced at them and sighed before turning to them. Well, it wasn't a kiss or anything if that's what you two are thinking. She replied, while motioning to Kushina and Naruko, who both went beet red at being caught thinking that was the case. Kurami then turned back to Naruto and said, I marked him as my mate, which requires me to bite his neck when he was 10 years old. At hearing this, Naruko and Kushina both felt jealous because they realized something. Kurami has spent more time teaching and being there for Naruto than either of them. Naruko didn't like this because she wanted her brother to herself and didn't like Kurami coming in trying to steal him away from her. Kushina didn't like this because that would mean that Naruto has been alone with Kurami for several years and had her there to teach him and help him, then she has as his mother. Kurami could tell what they were feeling and said, you guys shouldn't be feeling like that, it's not your fault you couldn't be there for him. This got the mother-daughter duo to look in shock at what Kurami said, expecting her to accuse them of being terrible family members. He is here because he wants to be with you guys and spend time to get to know you and for you to do the same. The duo were wide-eyed and began thinking about this, and realized she was right. They then heard a loud thud and turned to see Naruto was panting heavily with a puddle of sweat around him. They checked the clock and were surprised that they had been talking for almost 2 hours and all that time Naruto had been training. Then they heard a loud rumbling noise and were wondering where it came from until they heard Naruto moaning childishly, I'm hungry. Hearing the four women giggled at his antics, then Kushina said, "Go shower Naruto-kun, while I start lunch." "Okay ka-san." Naruto relied before getting up and moving a little easier, which surprised the three kunoichi, not expecting Naruto to move as easily so quickly. Kurumi wasn't surprised by this as she had seen Naruto get used to heavy weights and high amounts of gravity quickly before. As Naruto was getting up, the four women suddenly saw a tattoo on his back. It was a black cross made of bones with a grinning face on it that had a white, crescent-shaped mustache on it. Kurumi knew what it was because she had seen Naruto's back before. The other three didn't, however, as they had never seen Naruto shirtless before. Ace's tattoo of Whitebeard's Jolly Roger but black instead of purple. Kushina, however, being the mother she is, asked, "Naruto, when did you get a tattoo and what does it mean?" However, she began to get the feeling that she shouldn't have asked when Naruto suddenly froze and tensed up before he began to grip his fists so hard that they began bleeding from the palm. When Naruto turned around, the four women got terrified when they saw the look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated rage and the right half of his face was shadowed. This caused them to be even more scared when they saw his right eye began to shine pure white and forming behind. They saw what looked like a pitch black demon that had glowing white eyes, a glowing red mouth that had razor sharp teeth, claws for nails, and silver gray markings all around its body. However, this didn't compare to the amount of killing intent he was releasing, as it was so much that the entire village felt it, causing the Anbu and all of the clan heads to mobilize around the source to find Naruto was the cause. Asura's berserker mode. From Asura's wrath is Naruto's shadow. Naruto saw the looks of fear on everyone, as well as them tending for a fight. He closed his eyes to begin calming down by taking deep breaths. As he calmed down, the image in the shadow began to fade away and Naruto began to relax his body, before he looked at them with dead eyes filled with sadness, regret, and hidden rage that caused all those looking to feel his pain. Naruto then replied and said, "I got it when I left the village a few years ago, when I met my pop, because it was his mark. I still wear it to not only make him proud but also to remind myself of one of my greatest mistakes in not being able to keep him safe, but I promised him before his death that I would not let it hold me back." With that, Naruto walked inside, leaving everyone to think about what could have possibly happened to him when he left the village, as well as confused on what he meant when he said, "his pop." The Anbu then left except for Kat, who was still there along with the female clan heads. The clan heads, Kat, and Kushina were all wondering what could have happened that would cause such a reaction from him. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kurumi were trying to figure out what had happened to him. Naruto, because she wanted to know what happened to Naruto and what she could do to help. Kurumi, because Naruto has always told her everything and this was something that he hadn't told her, which saddened her greatly. With Naruto, Naruto was in the shower, going over what had just happened, and lying in the drawer with his clothes was a scroll that held a certain fruit. "I can't believe it almost came out again." Naruto thought, "I need to get more control so that it won't go berserk again and broke my promise." He then remembered what was in his possession and gripped his hand. "I also need to figure out what to do with that fruit." Naruto was berating himself for almost releasing a piece of that power by mistake, and letting his emotions weaken his control. He couldn't let every reminder of his mistake cause him to go off the rails, especially when he swore to never let it hold him back and needed to figure out what to do with the fruit inside the scroll. He began to remember what led to his father's death, him swearing to never let it hold him back before he came back, and the first time he ever went berserk, and him taking possession of the fruit. Flashback. 2 weeks before Naruto was seen returning by Hinata. Naruto was crying as he was watched as his pop was dying after taking so much damage. He covered in slash marks from swords and was full of holes of different sizes, with the two worst being the two massive holes in the front of his torso. His white crescent shaped was broken on the left side, blood leaking down from his mouth, head and all of the wounds. He was standing at his full height of 21 feet 10, shirtless, wearing blood-stained, light-colored pants tucked into his large black boots, a white captain's coat that bore the same symbol on Naruto's back, and a black bandana on his head with a matching dark sash tied around his waist. This was Edward Newgate, also known as Whitebeard, one of the Yonko. Naruto was blaming himself for being so caught up fighting. He never noticed the traitor to his pop's family come up and begin to attack his pop. It wasn't until the announcement that his pa was dying that he realized what had happened. He was listening to his pop's last words when he then looked at Naruto and said, "Remember, my son, you should never let your anger get the better of you, because it is when you do that you cause the worst damage to those around you and yourself. So, please, after this, let yourself live life to the fullest and try your best to not let it out of control so you can live without regrets and worries, and I want you to take my place among the Yonko, as well as my weapon that I will entrust to you. Naruto was crying tears as he couldn't believe that his pop was dying, and he wasn't there to help protect him. He couldn't believe that he had failed to keep him safe, and yet his pop still wanted him to take his place, as well as his weapon. As Naruto was thinking about this, everyone from his pop's crew, to every one of their allies began to leave, but he didn't move. He kept standing there with his eyes slowly widening before he began slowly get angry. Marco, who was retreating with the others, turned around, and saw Naruto just standing there not moving. Marco tried to get to his crewmate but was then grabbed and swept away with the others who were retreating to their ships. The Whitebeard crew and all their allies were already out at sea and hadn't realized they had left Naruto until Marco shouted, "Wait! We left Naruto behind." The entire Whitebeard crew and their allies suddenly turned to see Naruto still standing in the same spot with his head down surrounded by marine soldiers. They were about to turn around to go get him until Naruto's head snapped up to show he was filled with rage and his eyes were glowing completely white before he started screaming with pain, sadness, and rage in his voice. Then, a huge burst of red chaotic energy that began to go off in waves as he continued to shout, causing massive shockwaves to happen with electricity flowing everywhere. This caused an explosion of light that caused everyone to shield their eyes, and when the light died down along with the energy, they all saw standing in Naruto's place was a shiny, metallic-looking demon with glowing white eyes and a glowing mouth filled with fangs and claws. Behind him, looking connected to his shoulders, were 4 huge glowing yellow-orange arms with claws made of energy before he let out a roar of anguish and anger before everything flashed white. Flashback end. Naruto remembered waking up covered in bandages in the Mobi with a whitish-blue pair with swirls in the shapes of the letter S all over it on the stand next to the bed. While he was looking around, he saw his pop's Bisanto leaning on the wall in the room. He then heard the door open and saw Marco walk in, and he began to shout that Naruto was all right. The others then came rushing in exclaiming their joy at seeing him awake and alive. They all then informed him that after whatever happened, they all returned for him, only to find that the entire base had been destroyed with the only survivors being the Marine admirals who had already left when he transformed, and that all the Marine soldiers and Marshal D. Teach and his crew died as well. This led the group to finding 2 of their fruits had changed into the Gura Gura no Mi that was next to him, but the Yummy Yummy no Mi, they weren't sure what to do with it as they were afraid something would happen to it. Naruto then suggested that he take it with him inside a scroll that would never leave his side until he could find a proper owner. The others agreed and they brought the Yummy Yummy no Mi, which was a fruit that looked to be made of a lot of teardrop shaped pieces with swirl designs on them, and they watched him bring out 2 scrolls. They watched as he unrolled the one with the kanji for souvenirs on it, to reveal an intricate design of markings before he placed his hands on the scroll before in a puff of smoke he unsealed a pair of black-rimmed, maroon-tinted sunglasses, a pair of golden snake earrings, a snake-shaped gem necklace, a pair of red-rimmed glasses, 3 pieces of blue, hollowed-out steel that looked to be able to come together, a pair of red, ball-shaped earrings, a green furzerka with light green lining, a pink and purple bandana, a white cowboy hat, and finally a light green feather. Once done, he asked for the fruit which he placed among the pile of items, then resealed everything. He then opened the other scroll and copied the designs before he then wrote a note and sealed it inside, before rolling up the scroll and titling it, Darkness, and rolling it up. Everyone was confused until he explained that it was a way misdirect thieves, which got looks of understanding from everyone. They all then informed him that he had been unconscious for 5 days, and during that time they had been sailing around and were currently resting on a nearby island before asking what he wanted them to do. He said that they should set sail towards his home and afterwards they would leave him there so that he may continue training and that Marco would be in charge until he returned. They crew obviously disagreed with this decision, but then they stopped when he told them that he would be fine and that should they ever need him, to come back and send a message to Konoha, which is the village he was from. This got them to agree, and before long, they had been on their way back to his home, which took another 6 days of sailing. During which, Naruto, or the Gura Gura no Mi, gaining his pop's powers, and began to lightly practice them, due to where he was. They eventually reached the elemental nations, where Naruto disembarked, but not before giving Marco a couple of envelopes, that held letters and pieces of his vice card, that he asked be sent to specific places or people. Marco agreed wholeheartedly, giving Naruto peace of mind before he began making his way to Konoha, which took another 3 days of walking, which was the most he could do because of his injuries and continuing to lightly practice his pop's powers. When he finally returned to Kurami, who had stayed behind to keep watch of what happened in the village and with his Ka-san and his Imouto, he was fret over by Kurami upon seeing his bandages, before he managed to calm her down and tell her he was alright. Kurami then told him that the village hadn't been up to much, and then she told him how his Ka-san and Imouto had begun training heavily alongside several kunoichi, clan heads and their daughters, as well as their children's female friends, all so that they could bring him back home. This had surprised Naruto when he heard this, but then this lit a fire in himself to continue to get stronger and train harder, so that he wouldn't be left behind. Naruto shook himself out of his thoughts and finished his shower, before leaving his hair untied showing its true luster after the shower, putting on some maroon-colored sweatpants that closed at his ankles and a simple gray muscle shirt. He then walked out of the bathroom and smelled food and followed his nose, which led him to the kitchen where he saw his Ka-san, Kurami, Sume, Makoto, Hitomi, Anko, Kurenai, and Yugao all cooking. Kurenai then turned and saw Naruto looking at all of them curiously with his head tilted, causing her to blush and eep when she saw his strong, powerful-looking arms. This got the attention of the rest of the women in the kitchen before they all began to blush as well, causing an awkward silence. Before Anko broke it by whistling and exclaiming, "Damn! You're providing us one hell of a view, you know." Naruto knew this was an attempt to tease him before he gave a smirk that Anko could say she was proud of and acted innocent before saying, "Really? You're okay with just this?" Naruto asked, innocently, getting Anko to blush at realizing that he had her in a corner with the rest of the women sending subtle glares at her for opening her mouth. "I would have figured you'd try and rip my shirt off to see these." Naruto continued gaining their attention again, when they saw him lift the front of his muscle shirt with his right hand, revealing his rock-hard abs while having a confident look, which got him the reaction he wanted of all the women turning beet red and soon beginning to pant slightly before he let go of his shirt and began laughing while walking away. This action got the women's blushes to deepen, realizing they had just been played but also out of arousal from seeing Naruto look so. They all then felt themselves and thanked their stars for planning ahead and bringing spare panties because his appeal was off the charts. Naruto was walking through the house when he heard the sound of training and looked outside to see his sister and all her female friends from class all training. He saw Naruto and Satsuki training in Kenjutsu, Kira and Hinata were helping Ino, Sakura and Yakumo with their physical abilities by helping them in taijutsu. Naruto saw no reason to interrupt them and sat down on the wood floor and began watching them, while mentally taking notes on any flaws he sees. He saw Naruto and Satsuki were doing well, but their stances had holes that he knew any experienced shinobi or swordsman could take advantage of and land a critical strike. However, he knew these holes weren't from lack of training and actually from lack of battle experience. He then turned his attention to the others and saw that Kira's style relied on speed and combos with her partner who was currently sitting down in the shade. He couldn't say much about her regular taijutsu style, due to her not working with her partner, but he could see that in simple one-on-one fights where her partner was injured or she was separated from him, she would be in trouble because she didn't have a second style to fall back on should those scenarios happen. He then saw Hinata and immediately realized that she was strong and being a Hyuga would really help due to her Byakugan, but she didn't really focus on attacking or seem very confident, which could be her downfall, but he understands that she is a kind spirit and has low self-confidence. He then watched Ino and Sakura and decided that they needed to get their stamina and endurance up as well as their strength and get a proper style because they are going more for brawler styles at the current time. Yakumo, he saw something was severely wrong when she looked about to collapse even though she wasn't as physically adept as the others, she should have at least been the same level as Sakura and Ino, maybe a little better. While he was looking at Yakumo, he didn't notice Kira stop and sniff the air, before turning to his direction and seeing him. She blushed before she shouted, "Hey, Naruto." This got the reaction of all the girls stopping what they were doing to see Naruto calmly sitting on the floor of the porch, waving at all of them while calmly smiling. The girls all blushed seeing him with his hair out of its ponytail, because it made him look more handsome in their opinion, as well as wearing a muscle shirt which showed off his arms very nicely. Hinata began to heavily blush, Sakura and Ino were blushing as well, with hearts in their eyes, Kira was blushing brightly and had drool coming out of her mouth, and Satsuki, Yakumo, and Naruto just had light blushes, with Satsuki and Yakumo trying to not let it be noticed by turning their heads. Naruto then asked, "What are you doing, Ni-san?" Naruto chuckled at their reactions before replying, well, I was walking around and then I saw all of you training and decided to sit and watch, so that I could offer some help. This got the girls' attention as they then asked how they did. Well, you all are doing very well in your own rights. Naruto began getting them all to smile. However, there are just a few things that I saw, which could be problematic for you guys in the future. This got the girls to be serious and listen to what he had to say. Naruto and Satsuki, you both are amazing at Kenjutsu and your forms are amazing as well. However, there are a few holes in your stances and when you move, but that is just due to lack of battle experience, so you should be fine as you grow and fight. Explained Naruto, getting the two to smile and nod in understanding. He then turned to Kira. Kira, I didn't see much because you were focusing on helping these three with their taijutsu and physical training, which is